are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would? Story 1. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. Story 2. This actually happened to me. Interviewer, do you have any questions for us? Me, what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer, job security. Story 3. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. Story 4. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. Story 5. You'll get full-time hours but won't be full-time, aka we'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. Story 6. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee thanks bro, with my public transport travel time that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just the one. Edit. With all the stories and the reactions on this post, I just wanted to say that there really are good employers out there. Do not stand by being treated so poorly, because you deserve to be treated with respect. For any employers reading this thread, hey, race a few examples of how to create a loyal, healthy employee base. My current employer puts family first. If there is an emergency at home, they tell you to handle that first. For example, when I was miscarrying, they told me I don't want to see you in the next 2 weeks at least. Take your time and give me a call when you feel ready to come back in. Okay, 9 to 5 means 9 to 5. If you have to leave early for something or come in later BC of something, they expect you to take your own responsibility and don't even check if you actually catch up the lost time. They just expect that you do. By doing so, you create that on the rare occasion that you do have to stay late to finish something, you do that without complaining, because it only happens incidentally and not structurally and certainly isn't expected. In fact, they ask if you really have to stay late or if you just think you have to stay late. If you both give and take, you're much more likely to give back. They frequently and genuinely ask about your well-being, and then also follow that up. If you tell them your mother is unwell, they ask about her a week later. It's not lost in the abyss that is business. No, you feel seen and heard, you look stressed. Is there anything I can do? Do you want to go over your to-do list together and prioritize what needs done first? Things like this mean the world. One time they walked in and said, hey, my afternoon meeting got cancelled. I know you have like 15 files that need checking and I've seen how full your calendar is. Why don't you give me 4 and I'll make sure they get sent out today. To lighten your load a little, they focus on little tokens of appreciation. A chocolate Easter bunny waiting on your desk at Easter. Last year they hid 10 Easter eggs in every room. I found one hidden in the box of my crackers, haha. They make sure your salary is paid before Christmas even though you normally don't get paid before the 26th. They make sure every secretary gets flowers on Secretary Day. They bought us weird pens, think bright neon color with dangly beads on top, just because they thought it would brighten up our days. Like it only costs a penny, but it makes your staff feel seen. When there's a heat wave, they treat us with popsicles. When it's holiday season, they randomly decide to close the office at noon on December 31st. If we have to earn it in the last couple of hours of this day, we're doing something wrong. So let's shut down for the day. Have a good one, guys. They do not tolerate gossip. We talk with each other, not about each other. They hire capable staff. People who are not putting in the work effort do not last. They will ask us about people's progress. Like, what do you think about the new receptionist? And we can answer frankly, even if our opinion is that they're not making enough progress, etc. They want to know what we think and they value our input. This creates a healthy work environment, with driven people who all have heart for the cause. Mistakes are human, and we solve them together without smack-talking about the person responsible. Of course we all have our bad days and it's okay to mope and murmur here and there to your roommate, but we really try to keep that to an absolute minimum. Story 7. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, oh, she's not here today, in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW but could come in anytime THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello, I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow. Story 8. We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed, expecting more work for no extra pay, getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. Story 9. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times, was the worst jobs. Story 10. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15 years with no in-between. There is RNO room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. Story 11 when you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. Story 12 had an online interview with a company a few years ago, was interviewed by the regional manager. Seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software was set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. It was like being on a first date with someone, and finding out later she had a hidden camera on her and her parents and 6 other family members were watching the whole time. I'm like, yeah, no, that noise. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running. But management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. Story 13 I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate, so to attract me the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that one he could easily cherry-pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. 2 The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing, they were full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. 3 He showed me other people pay stubs, WTF. Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire, because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. Story 14 when they tell you what I'm paying you stays between you and me. Don't discuss pay with anyone else usually means they are trying to pay you less than your coworkers who do the same job and don't want you to know. Story 15 at my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption I spoke with boss name about it. I guess we're still doing it. That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. Story 16 I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the 1-page new hire contract and everyone except me signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said okay. I guess me is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. Story 17 jobs where the expectations of the position are unclear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities or day-to-day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what that lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like you won't be able to either. Story 18 not getting to speak with who your direct manager will be. A game room or ping pong table is advertised as a perk. The blatant overuse of buzzwords about your profession, clearly written by someone with no clue. People seem tired. Story 19 when they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company, they work hard, but also play hard. They don't play hard. It's a sweatshop and they're just trying to convince that it's anything but one. Story 20 they dodge questions on pay, meaning they don't pay enough for what they expect of you. The word family in reference to the employees means they want you to work lots of unpaid overtime. Edit also forgot, but if they keep talking about the experience you'll gain, that's also code for we know we're going to be underpaying you. Story 21 we work hard and we play hard. Translation you will work 60 hours a week. You'll be expected to work late nights and early mornings. People will treat this job like their whole life. We'll also underpay you. It may look like a decent salary but when you back it out to hourly it's not even remotely competitive with industry standard. But we have kegs and a ping pong table. Also, if everyone that interviews you has been there less than 2 years, it's a sign that they can't retain good employees. Story 22 last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back. So being your own lunch you'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also the people here are nice but it's pretty stressful. Ada also was told by my trainer you want to know the best advice I can give you, find another job. This was like my second week in. Story 23 my current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also the place undercut my pay offer I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. Story 24 once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me, and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. Story 25. I once interviewed for a job wherein the interviewer actually directly told me that the job was extremely stressful and they'd had a slew of new hires quit within a month or two. The job was at a psychiatric hospital. I thanked her for being honest with me and said that I was not interested. As she was walking me out, she leaned in and said, "You're doing the right thing. Our last hire quit because he said he was having palpitations all the time here and was worried he would have a heart attack." About 3 years later, at another company, I saw one of the women who had interviewed me. She worked in a totally different position in a totally different setting. She said that the other woman who had interviewed me, the one who gave me the warning, actually did suffer a heart attack. She survived, and she stopped working there. I was so thankful she warned me. Most interviewers wouldn't do that. Edit. And in thinking more about that woman, obviously SHE was very stressed, and SHE was having to cover work for that position that needed to be filled. She could have easily and understandably have gone into survival mode and thought, you know what, let's just hire her, meaning me, and then at least I will have some relief for a month or two until this one quits too. But she didn't do that. She thought of my welfare, a stranger, over her own interests, and clearly she was suffering. I would have relocated for that job too, about 150 miles. She was aware of that. Maybe that played into her decision to warn me, maybe not. Either way, she was an extraordinary person. Story 26 was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. Story 27. You're not going to have kids anytime soon, are you? What are your childcare arrangements? Are both things my wife has been on the receiving end of. You'd assume you wouldn't apply if it was an issue, right? Funnily enough, I'm a man and I've never been asked. Story 28. Do you have a strong personality? Meant everyone else who worked there were raging cunts who I literally got into massive shouting matches with and quit over within 6 months of having started. The money was good but no tie. Story 29. If they tell you not to discuss pay, I never ever followed this rule. It's important to find a way to broach the subject with your coworkers. If they are of the mind frame that it's impolite to ask someone their pay, then tell them yours and pay very close attention. Do they smile a bit? Do they look disappointed? Try to gauge from that. Because we don't discuss pay has always been a way to hold down wages and nothing else. It's illegal, but unfortunately it occurs anyway. Story 30. Receiving a job offer without a real interview, or even directly after the interview, that's usually a sign of desperation on the employer's end. Also avoid anywhere that says we're like family here. Also avoid any position that doesn't have a clear job description, or says something like, the incumbent is responsible for other duties assigned as management sees fit. They will make you there. Edit. To all those getting caught up on the exact wording of other duties as assigned. What I mean is, if they give you a very vague description of the job, or not exactly sure how to answer your questions, or have 3 bullet points of job description and then it's all other duties, or if they can't give you examples of other duties, be prepared to become that company's. Story 31. The one question every job applicant must ask is, why is this position open? And watch the faces of everyone in the room before they answer. If they tell you the company's growing and it's a new position, great. If Smiling Mary says it was her job but she was just promoted, terrific. If they tell you that the last couple of people they tried in the position just didn't work out, thank them and leave. Story 32. We're a family. Translation. We will constantly make you do stuff outside your job description. We will call you on your days off. We will accidentally lose any overtime records. We will yell at you. We will try to buy your affection with pizza lunch days. We will succeed because your morale will be obliterated. Story 33. When they get the interview time wrong and then gaslight you about it. I've had a couple interviews where that happened and the person told me it was me who made the mistake. I did not feel bad missing the opportunity. Story 34. I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong. I noticed that when that question came up they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo. And even when COVID hit they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Edit. Oh gosh, thank you, my first ever award, made my week. Story 35. I went into an interview for a low-level admin position, and they made me put my cell phone in a bucket up front, stating no phones are allowed in the back. It reduces productivity. Big nope for me. Story 36. Your salary is completely commission-based and you won't get paid for 2 months every solar panel sales job. Edit. I interviewed at a few. Not everyone has 2 months worth of savings right now. Story 37. You get hinted at stuff or they beat around the bush on scheduling explanation. Here they like to hire part-time then schedule you 39, 5 hours or 30 minutes before full-time to avoid paying insurance and such. Story 38. Lots of people standing at colleagues' desks chatting. Either you'll be expected to be present at all times without a sufficient workload, or you'll be picking up the slack for coworkers. Also, I've had lots of interviews where they told me they didn't expect me to have a 9 to 5 mentality. I tend to throw back ashore. If the work is done by 3, I'd be okay with leaving early and consider anybody who seriously objects to that not worth working for. Story 39. If one or more family members work for the boss, their kids especially, you'll end up getting screwed while their family members get raises and get the easy stuff. you'll end up overworked, underpaid, and talked down to no matter how much seniority you have. Story 40 company image is a priority. We expect our employees to conduct themselves appropriately during off hours. Basically, we own you, you dress how we want, look how we want, and act how we want from now on. I once applied for a job as a laborer at the local shipping company's warehouse. They asked me to come in for a job interview and bring copies of my resume and criminal record, which I thought was reasonable, since everybody else was asking for the same. The interview was conducted by the supervisor of the department, but the manager of the warehouse was also present for the interview. When I handed the documents to the supervisor, he was immediately visually surprised and went, "Whoa, hey, check it out," a clean record to the manager, and that was it. The next thing I knew, the interview was over and the manager went, "All right, kid, let's show you around the place." I didn't take the job. Story 41 guy quit during my interview. Edit thanks for gold. Didn't expect that at all. I'll edit 2 should have given the story. Few years ago I was interviewing for a position at a esteemed gaming retail chain. It's known for abusing their employees and just in general being a pretty shitty job due to rude and disrespectful customers. So I'm interviewing for it and one of the lower managers comes in and hands in their keys, complained about the toxicity of the environment and said they couldn't take it anymore. I got their position after a bit of training and realized I should have taken the warning then. I've been out for about a week now and I feel so much better. Retail sucks, especially at that job. Story 42 I was told we want long-term employment. Don't just leave after 5 to 6 years. Okay, what do you pay, and what about raises? His response, 12 an hour, 3 to 4 increases every year. Nope, told him I'm all set. This was an armored truck service. I had to carry my gun and wear a vest, which they did offer to pay for. They just took it out of your pay. $600 for handgun, $400 for vest. You had to possess a permit to carry prior to applying. I went back to private EMS. Same pay, but I didn't have to protect other people's money with my life for peanuts. Edit, my issue with this is that this seemed like a place that would absolutely abuse you if anyone ever found out you were looking somewhere else. We want long-term employment and will pay you. To me, this means we will retaliate and make your life if you try to leave. Story 43 my GF once during interview, whilst touring the business premises with the director of development, asked, "Do you do flexible working or work from home some days?" The development director looked longingly as if that was an unachievable dream and said, "Oh, I'd love to do flexible working." Story 44 I always ask individuals interviewers how they like working there. The response doesn't matter, it's the time they take to respond. If they immediately chime in with positives, it's usually a safe work environment, but if they pause to think about it, that is a big red flag. Story 45 low tenure can be a big warning sign. If the entire team has turned over in the last 5 months, it may be for another reason, but I found that it's usually because the culture is awful. Story 46 check the break room and restroom. If it's full of cheap no-frill stuff, it means they're on a shoestring budget and looking at cost savings methods. Story 47 besides always hiring, they seem almost overly eager to say, "Yes, we could do that," to everything you ask. No job will have literally everything you want, and if your gut is telling you they seem to be promising a bit more than they can offer, they likely are. Story 48 I had an interview once. The owner of the company told me he was going to hire me, let the man in the office train me, then fire that man once I was up to speed. He also told me that sometimes employees have to hold their paycheck. And the final capper, not that I needed it, I had already decided not to work for him, was he told me I looked like his nephew. I am female. Story 49 my boyfriend just interviewed for a call center that will not consider applicants unless they have 247 availability. Needless to say, he declined the position. Story 50 I had a job interview with 2 people asking questions. One of them brought questions for the wrong position. Things I found out later, the person on the IT team who had been with the company longest had been there just under a year. Their turnover was higher than McDonald's, over 50 turnover annually. They had a goal to get it down to 40. Bonuses only get paid 1 year after you've been there, for a full calendar year. That only starts counting on January 1st. If you get hired January 2nd, 2020, you wouldn't get your first bonus until 2022. There was no manager for the programmers. There was no director for the IT team. They had tracking software for your every keystroke, idle time, programs you were active in. They would question idle time, which meant people on the phone with clients would be questioned often because their computers would be idle. There was a lot going wrong, but the interview slip-up wasn't enough to really give it away in time. Suffice it to say, they didn't meet their turnover reduction goal. Story 51 ask about how long the employees have been around. No one over 5 years. Bad sign. It means everyone keeps hitting the same roadblock, which is most likely management. Story 52 no one decorates their desk. Means that either they don't get their own desk, no one has time for any interests outside of work, or the culture is stuffy and no fun. Similarly, for tech in particular, if everyone has the same brand of keyboard, it's because they have to. Basically, no one chooses to code for 8 hours a day on a cheap Microsoft keyboard if they can help it. Story 53 we cater lunch and dinner for our whole team. Sounds like a positive, but what it means is, we expect you to be working past dinner time hours, and there will be a lot of social pressure to never leave, and to socialize with a team well past working hours. We don't understand that anyone might want a life outside of work. Less of a problem now, hopefully, but in the tech bro heyday, this was super common. Story 54 I interviewed for a job and the guy was just kind of off-putting. He answered a personal call the middle of the interview. which fine whatever, but never addressed or said sorry or excuse me for a second out of common courtesy and professionalism, just sat and talked for an awkward couple of minutes. I was running errands all the next day and had 3 missed calls from the workplace. Missed another call the next day, but at that point I had decided it wasn't for me. When I tried returning his call to tell him I was no longer interested, he wasn't there. But then it became kind of entertaining because he called me nearly every day for 2 weeks after my interview. It's just a retail job, so I can only imagine how hard-pressed he was to have an employee and how that work environment must be. Story 55. When they do a peer interview, I always ask my would-be peer when was the last time took vacation or received job training. Besides just the words, you get a lot from their facial expression when you ask. Story 56. The game is changing with work from home becoming the norm. The old tactics of checking the break room and office decor no longer apply. The usual standbys are still there. Check the benefits, the time-off policy in particular. How does vacation, sick and float work if it's a large company? Is paternity leave paid? Or is maternity leave even a thing? If there's no retirement policy, then that's all you need to know. If there isn't 401k matching, it's also not a long-term deal. With the work-from-home situation, are they really explicit about how excited they are to return to office? Ask how they are enjoying work from home. Is remote work interfering with their business when it shouldn't? That's concerning. You'll get a sense of the organization's leaders as being out of touch based on the sticking point in particular. Are they offering to provide a budget to provision your home office? That's your green flag that they've thought this through. Most of this applies to office jobs. Mostly because manufacturing and service ate in the US decades ago. Cubicle life is the new factory worker, so don't expect pensions and lifetime positions anymore. Story 57. I was once interviewed by 2 women and 3 men at an assessment center. One woman was a HR manager, the others were senior managers. When I spoke to the senior female manager alone, I asked her about the gender split. She said, honestly, I'm the only senior female 150 and sometimes the men expect me to clear up after the meetings. I'm so glad that she was honest. I rejected that offer. Story 58. How they treat their employees and how clean the place is. If everyone looks stressed and unhappy, I do not feel comfortable working for the company. Also the cleanliness of the place. If the place is unclean, it shows unprofessionalism and no care for staff or customers. Story 59. 1. Bad interview times. 2. They're not really prepared for what you bring on the table. 3. We have benefits, which is good, but what exactly are those benefits? 4. Work environment seems strained and socially clique. Story 60. I have a friend who is a senior director for a Fortune 500 company. A few years ago, another Fortune 500 company was trying to poach her for their organization. At the end of the interview, the director leading everything told her, I will get back to you after discussing with my VP. At that point, she was done. She got on a plane and flew back home before they even made an offer. She told me that if the person running the interview doesn't have the authority to make the decision to hire you, then the company has too much bureaucracy and micromanaging to be worth it. She didn't care how much money they offered, it was a lot. She just knew working there would be a nightmare. Story 61. We have a very special work culture here. It takes special people to thrive. Not always, but often means that the workplace is a pressured hole with unreasonable demands heaped on staff and a kind of nasty employee-blaming mindset when things don't work out. Story 62. I interviewed for a secretarial position, and they asked a suspicious amount of questions relating to inter-office gossip, which led me to believe they experience a lot of drama, which would. Story 63. If the employer acts like they are doing you a favor by hiring you, employment is an exchange of money for service, not a recruitment for a cause. Even employers who are offering you an opportunity of a lifetime should treat you with respect. If it's that good an opportunity, they will only want to hire the best, and they should treat you as such. The attitude of you would be lucky to work here usually means they plan to treat you like and make you feel grateful for it. I've learned this the hard way. Story 64. I need to hire 13 people in the next 2 months to run this location. I will be moving up to LA to work in corporate. Turns out it was an MLM pest control company. When you're hired on, you have to buy your uniform from them, which is around $300. The manager literally showed me the code to the chemical storage locker in my interview. Story 65. I tried to get a part-time job at the university where the interviewer out of the gate said he didn't think a woman could do the job. I showed up to the interview to find he'd forgotten to tell me I had to prove I could lift a 30 pounds rock core, and obviously I couldn't do that in my interview dress and heels. He wasn't happy when I disproved him. If there wasn't enough, he then said the job was 30 hours a week during the day, exactly during the time of 90 of the college classes. When I pointed this out, he said to switch to night classes mid-semester drop out. I left and reported him to Student Employment Services. Story 66. The person whose position you be filling. No, you can't contact them. No, we don't allow staff to move between departments. No, you can't walk around and talk to any staff. Story 67. I turned down a job as manager at a cool restaurant. BC. 1. Red flag. The owners work there and try to be involved in everything. 2. I was 5 minutes early. Her first words to me, you were almost late. 3. She then proceeded to talk about her staff right in front of them. No fucking way, lady. Story 68. I never made it to the interview. I got an email asking me to come in for an interview on date. I replied asking if there were other options as I would be on vacation on date. Never got a reply. Figured if they couldn't work around that then I didn't want to work there anyway. Story 69. A clue is, if you work here you get to play video games. ping pong or other forms of entertainment in the break room, and we have lots of parties. That's a clue, maybe not so subtle, that the actual job is horrible with little to no benefits outside of your salary. Story 70. If training is full of games, fun, food, we are a family mentality, and what seems like a constant advertisement for how great it is to work there, oftentimes a sign of the opposite, borderline brainwashing. Story 71. Job offers 2 days of PTO for your first year. The cost of benefits is extremely high. We've been having a hard time finding people. I don't think people want to work. No, people don't want to work for free. Story 72. If you ask about work-life balance and they seem annoyed at the question, or avoid answering directly, you can expect to work very long hours, including when sick. Story 73. Last job I interviewed for was dead silent. They were literally whispering when showing me around the office. When I asked my potential team how many hours they were working, answer was 12 to 14-hour days. But when you work past 7 p.m. you get 15 towards your dinner. Yeah, no thanks. I passed on the job, and that entire team left a few months later. Story 74. We work hard and play hard. You will work very hard, and afterwards you'll have the opportunity to up to the boss while drinking in their favorite bar. If you don't go, you won't advance. Story 75. Interviewer asks questions in rapid fire rather than conversing. Suggests the process may be overly structured. No time or very little time to answer interviewees' questions. Likely suggests they see you as a commodity, roundabout or evasive answers to questions about the employer's shortcomings. Story 76. The interviewer blatantly stares at your and his co-interviewers during the interview, or interviewing for a role and not being offered the role. Then randomly several weeks later, completely unexpectedly and out of the blue, getting a message in your spam folder about interviewing for another position with a sister company, and it has a date and time request that has passed. You email the contact back and apologize for missing the message and ask if there is still a chance to come in for an interview. They get annoyed with you and tell you that if you were expecting an interview request you should be checking your spam folder, a few choice words back for that person, and never applying at that company again. These were both management roles in professional corporate organizations.